Hey everyone, and welcome back to Volunteer Friendly. This is a weekly podcast that's less than 10 minutes for folks that are involved in making Sunday happen. So whether you're a worship leader, a production person, music director, someone involved in tech, if you work at a church on a Sunday morning, this podcast is for you. This is a little different than the content I normally post here on the channel. From Studio Stage is a tech-focused channel. But I wanted to have a podcast that speaks directly to worship leaders, to tech directors, to folks involved on Sundays, and do something a little different. Provide a podcast that asks some questions, makes you really think hard, to think deep about things, to ask questions about why are we doing what we're doing. Like I mentioned, each episode is less than 10 minutes, and I provide you with 3 questions every single week to try to do that, to implement that. So today I am asking the question, are you taking Sunday for granted? You can probably guess what the first question is of our 3 questions, but I thought this would be a really good episode because this is something that I've found myself falling into so many times. I just recently, as of the time of recording this, about 3 weeks ago, I believe, maybe less than that, 2 weeks ago, stepped down from my church, the position that I had as broadcast director, and back to, or I'm full-time from studio to stage now. And this is the first time in 3.5 years that I have not worked at a church. And before that, took a little break working for a company that was a church resource company for musicians. But the past 3 years I've been on staff at a church. And before that, every job I had was being at working at a church, either as a worship leader, production person, musician, music director, all sorts of different roles, creative director, all the things. But this is something, I found myself falling into so often. And I think one of the things that often took me there, well, let's talk about what I'm talking about first, then I'll talk about what I think often took me there. I don't know if it's the same for you, but it did this for this thing led to this for me. So something that often happened for me was I found myself taking Sunday for granted. I would show up, wake up early Sunday morning, maybe 5:30, get to church 6 a.m., sound check, either the band or I'm on stage playing and someone's sound checking my guitar or whatever. And I'm playing on stage as we're sound checking, or as broadcast director, we're setting up video stuff and leading a volunteer team and checking our shots and everything, and either preparing to direct or to tech direct or to just kind of hang out and watch and observe everything. But something I so often found myself doing was just taking Sunday for granted. I would forget the purpose of Sunday. I would forget that most people spent 6 days a week outside of the church and 1 day in the church. I would forget that most people work in a place that's not a church, and most people interact with people and don't talk about ministry and don't discuss ministry philosophies and don't discuss process and templates and ways to improve efficiency, and they just come into church. I would forget that most volunteers that would come into church to volunteer spent most of their week doing something completely different, and I spent my entire week focused on this one thing. And Sunday would happen, and then Sunday would be done, and I find myself on the couch at home watching a football game, watching the race after church, and I would so often kind of look back and go, oh yeah, we had church this Sunday. I forgot. This was a corporate gathering of people for corporate worship. And I would just kind of forget that. And I think that's a dangerous place to be, no matter what your role is. I will say, let me speak, because I've been both worship leader, creative director. I've been on stage as a musician, music director. That was kind of the primary of my role. And then the second half of my kind of quote unquote ministry, or working full-time in a church career, if you will, was as a production person, someone leading worship off stage, right? So I spent probably the first half leading worship on stage, second half leading worship off stage. And this is something that I see, particularly for those of us that lead off stage, that's really, really easy to make happen, to take Sunday for granted. And I think that goes into some of how we're wired as production folks. I think it goes into the fact that sometimes we could be cynical. I think it goes to the fact that we're not in the spotlight. We're often not getting praise or recognition for what we've done. We're helping people that are on stage those people are getting the recognition most often. I know that's like a icky thing to talk about, but it is true. And it does happen that people go, man, that was a great song. That was a whatever. It's very rare that someone goes up and goes, man, the lights today were amazing. It's typically, why was there so much haze? I can't see. This is a rock show. Why are you making a production? Rarely do people come up and go, man, that was such a great mix this morning. But what do? Oh, it's so freaking loud. This is, what is this, a rock show? Why is everything so loud? So I think because of that culture, that environment we're typically in, it's often really easy for us to take Sunday for granted, which then leads to apathy, which leads to us not doing our best, and just we start to become toxic and create a toxic culture. I did mention there's something that tends to lead me to that. That's one of those things, me being a cynical person. Me, when I am in a production role, someone who's leading worship off stage, it's a little easier for me to go there when I'm on stage. But something that I found a lot that led me there was process, efficiency, templates, things that I would do to improve things that were a problem. We've talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I'm not trying to say we should get to where Sundays are chaotic and are a mess and are not efficient and are not going well. I'm not trying to say that. But there is a danger. We have to all admit, we have to all be on the same page here, that I think there is a danger of us making things so efficient and so smoothly that we get to the end of Sunday and go, oh, did I even pray and ask for like God to help us like get through this? Did I do this service completely out of my own strength? And I think as someone who gets frustrated by little inconveniences, and as someone, for me personally, for someone who wants to iron out all those issues, to get the process right, to use templates for freedom and flexibility, that's my personality. As someone that is geared towards that, I think it's always been really easy for me to template things to death. It's always been easy for me to build a process to the point where I can end a Sunday service, and I've attempted to do the whole thing in my own strength. Now, there's this odd reality that we can't do this in our own strength, but I think we can go a couple Sundays, God forbid a couple months, God forbid a couple years of trying to do things in our own strength and just taking Sundays for granted and forgetting the importance of what happens on Sunday and forgetting the fact that we're in the church 7 days a week. Hopefully less than that, because hopefully we get a Sabbath, but we're in the church, every single day of the week preparing for Sunday. Sundays happen. We go home. We're just like, oh, thank God I get to relax and not think about church. And then we do it all over again 6 days later, 7 days later. I think it's really easy for us to take Sundays for granted. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to wrap up with 3 questions. This is how we typically go. I hope this episode wasn't a downer for you. I'm just kind of processing out loud. This is another reason why I like Volunteer Friendly. It's my space to like process and to think through things. I'm telling you, this is something that I struggle with so much. One of the things that has really helped me is to have some space to like contemplate about things and then to discuss that with folks. And that's what we try to do on Volunteer Friendly. So every week I give you 3 questions to contemplate, hopefully on your own. That's what I'm really trying to encourage people to do. Contemplate these on your own and then take them to your team and discuss. Practical way that I try to do that is old school. I give you a PDF download that you can download each week with these 3 questions. Process on your own. Literally print them out, kill some trees, write your answer down, and then discuss this with your team, maybe before a rehearsal, before a sound check with your tech team, with your volunteers, maybe even with your staff team. I hope these are beneficial to you. So let's get to our 3 questions. Question number 1, you probably know where this is going based on our show title for this week. Number 1, are you taking Sunday for granted? Do you get home and celebrate the fact Sunday is over because it was so exhausting Monday through Saturday leading up to Sunday that you're just celebrating the fact that it's over and realize you never once said like, wow, this is a pretty powerful thing I get to be a part of. This is a pretty important thing I get to be a part of. Are you there every single day of the week? And because of that, you're missing that Sunday is an impactful, special time for people once a week. Number 2, how can you revalue what Sunday is? That's not worded the best possible way, but it's going to work for the purposes of what we're doing. It's purely utilitarian here. How can you revalue what Sunday is? What steps can you take to try to add the value back to Sunday, to rediscover, not add back, but rediscover the value that is there in Sunday in a corporate gathering of believers to worship? Number 3, this is maybe more for me, but if this is where you are, and if smooth process and templates and things figured out lead you to take Sunday for granted, then this is for you as well too. Number 3, what process can you kill or processes can you kill? What process can you kill for the sake of newness? And what I just mean is, can there be something on Sunday that when you walk in, and I'm not talking about adding chaos and disorder into something that's orderly. I'm just saying, what's something that you could walk in and, as opposed to feeling like you've got it, that you have to depend on God to make it through that Sunday? Is there anything? Maybe even hearing that, you're like, that's not what I feel like we're called to do. We'll work through that. Why is that? Why do you feel tension? Push back to me asking that. So that's what we have for this week. Again, I hope it's not much of a downer this week. It's a helpful thing for me to think through because Sundays are important, and what we're doing on Sundays are very, very important. And we shouldn't just get to the end of a Sunday service and plop down on the couch and celebrate the fact that Sunday's over without celebrating the fact that Sunday existed in the first place and services happened. Thank you guys so much for listening to Volunteer Friendly. Again, if you didn't, make sure you download those questions, contemplate them on your own, discuss them with your team. I'll see you back here next week. This is such a fun podcast to do. I appreciate when you guys interact, particularly on YouTube. Let me know if you have any questions or topics you want to dive into, or things that you think will provide some lively discussion. You can leave a comment over on the YouTube channel there for this episode. But thanks so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next week on Volunteer Friendly. Take care, everybody. Bye.